What the fuck is... What are you doing, horse? Where is my animation? Well, okay. It's that time of year again where I'm tired and want to do a thing, but don't have time, so you get to listen to my voice instead. This year I'm shamelessly stealing an idea from video essayist and man who is neither big nor Joel, Big Joel, and doing a Trash Day video. What's Trash Day? Well, I'll let him explain.
I've been making videos about movies and junk for a while now, and when you do that for long enough, you amass a sea of little ideas that aren't really worth anything. Some ideas are too specific to draw any kind of audience, and some just aren't meaty enough for a full-blown video. So today, I'm going to take you through 5 of these little ideas, and hopefully that'll be a good time.
I love that little yay wipe that he does. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about concepts for comics and stuff that I'm never going to finish, or other random little ideas that I'll never have time to see through, so let's get into it. The first of these ideas is a comic called Sonic the Hedgehog Final Freedom. Oh boy, it's Sonic. Yes, dear viewers, in the long ago before time, I was in the Sonic fandom, and I did a lot of roleplay things, and over the years of doing that, creative ideas just kind of built up, and eventually one day, after I'd put it all down, I went to bed one night, and this comic just played out in my head like a movie. I don't know why, that's just what happened. I've lightly edited some of the more nonsensical aspects of the story because it's a transcribed dream, basically, but the heart of it should be intact. Sonic is chilling in his humble abode in the jungle. He lives with his friends Tails and Knuckles, and they have a modest existence, hanging out, foraging and scavenging and stuff like that. They live in the shadow of a lot of ancient ruins, but also some more recent ones for reasons we'll get to in a second. One day, they meet some strangers crossing the bridge outside their home. Sonic recognizes one of them as Princess Sally Acorn, who he remembers from his childhood. They haven't seen each other for years. He doesn't recognize her traveling companions though, and what with them being a cyborg and an AI, his friends are immediately suspicious. This is a world where all of their homes were destroyed by Dr. Eggman and his army of robots. Sally insists they're actually on their way to fight Eggman, but there's still nearly a fight. They allow them to pass, but they won't join them. They don't trust them, or at least Tails and Knuckles don't. That night, Sonic goes into the hills to visit the grave of his dear old Uncle Chuck. Chuck rescued the young Sonic and Tails from Mobotropolis when it was attacked, and brought them to Jade Jungle and into hiding. Eggman's victory was thorough and complete. There is nothing left of Mobotropolis, and nary a shred of resistance worldwide. This is a world in the wake of an apocalypse, basically. Sally is the first inkling of resistance that he's come across in years. He decides, there and then, on reflection, to join them. Tails and Knuckles take a bit of convincing, but they come around. Their journey takes them along the Calamity Coast, a macabre new name for the scenic cliffs that Mobians once called home, where the fallout of Eggman's weapons still lingers. There's electricity storms raging up and down, chunks of cliff just drifting off into the sky, and space-time vortexes peppering the region with temporal jitters. Sonic and friends catch up with Sally in a gorge, coming apart from a gravity disruption. Their rival reactivates a dormant killbot, and suddenly they all have to work together. They bring it down, but they're committed now, so Eggman, he knows they're coming. Their journey takes them underground and through some old geothermal tunnels, away from the worst of the devastation, and brings them up in the ruins of Mobotropolis. The streets still swarm with roving robots, and environmental hazards make traversing the city perilous. Sally laments the mistakes of the Acorn Kingdom in its last days. Resolutely anti-technological and backward-looking, the kingdom tried to push technologists and their like to the fringes of society. Uncle Chuck was one of these shunned people, and it may have saved their lives. A similar twist of fate may have saved Sally as well, since it was that day that she was given to coal, which took her out of the city. They leave the city behind and move on to the airship port in the mountains. Standing in their way is one of Eggman's lieutenants, Mobians who fought for Eggman in exchange for a place ruling his empire and technological immortality. Lienda tells them what they already know, that Eggman knows they're coming, and it's only going to get worse from here. In particular, Lienda enrages Knuckles. He calls her a traitor, and she laughs it off. They fight, it's hard, but Lienda is more machine than Mobian at this point, so they can use some of the same techniques they used to bring killbots down to defeat her. She's the only resistance that came to meet them here, and now the sky is open to them. Their plan is to use the old airships to reach Eggman's atmospheric bombing network and use it against him. As they approach, they attract the attention of another lieutenant. As they approach, they attract the attention of another Lieutenant, Jet the Hawk. Please don't laugh. He harries them all the way to the station, and it's only through teamwork that they manage to avoid being bested by air superiority. The fight turns in their favour once they reach the control station, and Jet has to fight them without the advantage of flight, and they force him to retreat. While they're working to get access to the bombing network, Eggman dials in and starts to taunt them. He deorbits the station and brings it crashing down in a not nice place. In a narrow escape, they bail out before the station lands in an acid lake. Sonic and Sally know this place. There's an old Mobian listening post nearby. Since it was abandoned, runoff from Eggman's industries have turned the place into a toxic hellscape. The listening post might be survivable for a little while they regroup, tend to their injuries, and come up with a better plan. While Tails and Nicole fix up the AC to work as an air filter, Knuckles is asked what was with his reaction to Lien Da. Angel Island, he says, was one of the last holdouts against Eggman when he took over. He was in line to be the guardian of the Master Emerald, but when Eggman came for it, a defector faction led by Lien Da made defending the island impossible. It was after the island's fall that Knuckles fled and found Sonic in the jungle. Sally remarks that this is not unlike how they found Bunny. Bunny was the last survivor of her village, which was hit by one of Eggman's experimental weapons, turning the people and most of the buildings to solid steel. Bunny was hiding in a basement, so it was only her arm and legs that were hit, so they had to be replaced after she was found. These days, the place is called the Uncanny Valley. Rested up, they move on to Plan B and go to Eggman City to face him directly. Their research indicates that much of the outskirts of the city are entirely mechanical. Everything interacts electronically, so if they aren't emitting electronic signals, they might be able to slip in undetected. This means Nicole will have to power down, Bunny's legs and arm will have to be disabled. Bunny's initially against this plan because it brings back some traumatic memories, but concedes that it's their best shot, and she trusts her friends to help her through. As they travel through the silent city of machines, they notice that something is following them. Eggman's third lieutenant, Shadow the Hedgehog. Listen to this Sonic comic, give me a break. They're in no condition to fight him, so they evade him. When they reach the fiery core of Eggman's empire, they locate the man himself, power up, and prepare to fight. It's the fight of their lives, and it takes everything they've got. Eggman has access to all of his defenses, they have to go through Shadow as well, and on top of that, Eggman has an enormous warbot to pilot against them. It takes all of their skill, cunning, and expertise to fell it. But in the end, it comes down in flames. And then, to their horror, Eggman walks out of the flames unscathed. He's become entirely machine himself, and he's nigh indestructible. He even taunts them by revealing that the only thing with a chance of destroying him is one of his own weapons. And where are they going to find one of those? They wouldn't even be able to access them with their feeble organic minds. This is his world, he declares. You are obsolete. Nicole simply smirks and then disappears. There's a message on her display. Run. Eggman immediately works out what's happening, but his attention is divided. Sonic, Sally, and crew are tearing a path out of the city, while Nicole is breaking into the weapon systems from Eggman's own terminals. This distraction allows him to get away as Eggman City is consumed by his own tool of destruction. From the mountains, they watch the fallout. Nicole's console is still unresponsive. It's not clear whether she made it out. Outside the blast radius, the robots keep whizzing about on their duties. It's an automated empire. The body still functions without the head. Maybe there's even backups of Eggman somewhere. But at least this is a start. Were you prepared for an edgy Sonic comic today? I don't know if you were, but that's what you got. God knows what would have happened if I'd actually gone through with that. So, while you digest some of that, I'm going to digress briefly about characters that I chose to include in the story and why. A lot of the Sonic media that bounced around in my head to create this story was the Archie Sonic comics, and they had a very weird period in the mid-90s when they were coming out with like multiple side comics because it was the height of the 90s comics bubble, but it was also the height of Sonic's popularity. And after the release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but before Sonic Adventure, they had a period of about 3 years where they had nothing to go on, but they still had to produce lots of comics. So the lead writer at the time, Ken Penders, took this as license to do whatever he wanted, and what he wanted was an incredibly convoluted backstory for Knuckles. To his credit, the themes of his backstory are congruent with the themes of Sonic the Hedgehog overall, which can't be said for all of the nonsense that the comic was blurting out every other week, a lot of it Penders related, but the execution is... leaves something to be desired. It's filled with absolutely wild things that you're supposed to take deadly seriously, like fire ants and characters with names like Edmund the Echidna. There's this like dramatic tone shift. I mean, it's not a very sudden tone shift, but you know, the Archie Sonic comic started out with like a very adventuresome and wacky Looney Tunes kind of tone, and then by issue 50, when all this, Knuckles backstory nonsense comes in, they've just killed Robotnik. Like, he's just been erased from existence. And all of this is underscored by the fact that every single echidna in the story basically looks like Knuckles, but put through the random costume generator from Bulletstorm. Like, look, here's Knuckles with a beard, here's Knuckles with glasses, here's Knuckles with a couple of side robots. Penders, he later sued several people over BioWare's inclusion of the Dark Brotherhood in the Sonic RPG, which he claimed was derivative of his Dark Legion from the comics, which led to Penders' contributions to the comic being removed, which, it's fine, we won't use these 200 Knuckles clones. And this was all rendered moot in a couple of years by the Genesis reboot, and later the transfer of the license from Archie to IDW. Penders, I believe, won at least one of his lawsuits. So now he has the rights to all of these Knuckles knockoffs, but not the design of Knuckles. So now he's trying to do some weird sci-fi thing with characters like Julie Sue and Lienda, and they're aliens now, and they they look like they're out of some furry zine from the 80s. That's why it's so funny when you see this guy flexing on the Sonic movie that's coming out. What have you done to get this guy, dunking on you? Anyway, the reason I bring Penders and his many not Knuckles up is because a couple of these characters can be made interesting. I just have reservations about using them because they're very obscure characters, for one thing, and the association with Penders makes them kind of inherently comical. Lienda, as I mentioned, is a villain that sits well with the thematic tension of the world. There's another character who I cut from this version, Jeffrey St. John, who I just remember really liking the first time I read the comics. On second read, it turns out he's a bit creepy. I didn't notice that the first time I was reading. In an earlier draft of this comic, I had the party pick up Jeffrey in Mobotropolis, along with Rouge the Bat and Antoine de Coulette, but I axed that part because they had no good reason to be there, and the cast was getting a bit cluttered at that point. Maybe if this was a less singular story and more of like an ongoing thing, I'd have an excuse to have more characters hanging around, but it is what it is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this trash day, and if you liked it, well, it's only uphill from here, because I think some of my other ideas are a bit better than this one.
They're made of wood!